Welcome back to the Prosperity Playbook. You've got Renee Britt and our special guest, Susan Beth Breuner, again this week. If you missed her episode last week, make sure you go back and watch that one. It was about transitioning life, things such as your career. And she's just a wealth of knowledge around that and has handled that with grace several times throughout her life. So go check that one out. Today, we're going to be switching gears a little bit. So Susan Beth is an amazing photographer. And one of the things that she specializes in is her business that's called Strong Confident Femininity. And she doesn't want to call it boudoir, but it's that style. And she's going to tell us why she does that a little bit different. But the goal there is to kind of help people be seen in the way that they want to be seen. And I think a lot of times we show up in the version of ourselves that we think is going to be accepted by the rest of the public or our husband or our boss or our friends or whoever that is. So this episode is going to be all about authenticity and how do we really show up like that. So thank you for listening and welcome back, Susan Beth.
Thank you. It's good to be back with you guys.
Love it. Will you give us just a brief rundown of just kind of the identity behind Strong Confident Femininity and, how you chose how you want people to feel when you are taking their photos?
Okay. I knew I wanted to do some, at that time I would have said boudoir, and that label still applies some. But I had a friend who's a hair and makeup artist who set me up with 6 people she had done their wedding hair and makeup or was going to do their wedding hair and makeup. And we started to build a portfolio that day. And I had taken classes. I knew about posing and all this stuff for very traditional boudoir because that's mostly where the education comes from. But what I found with these women was that, and partly this happened because I was unsure. This was my first time doing this style of photography. And these women, some of them had modeled before. And I found that they were willing to participate in some of the creativity, to give a little bit of feedback. And they were excited that I gave them the space for that. And I loved the images that we got. I was very comfortable with the level of modesty or not modesty that they used. And at the end of the day, we all went out to a restaurant and had dinner together, all of the models and the hair and makeup artist and myself. And they told me there was something different about that. And that struck in my mind. So that was my first time actually taking pictures in this style, besides some selfie work. And
Love that.
As one does.
Well, and as one who's a photographer experimenting does.
Yeah.
And I really kind of glommed onto that very early on. And I felt like what I had heard from these women, it took a while to develop this language to describe it, but I felt like what I heard from these women was it was far more empowering if they had an opportunity to participate in this. Over the next year or two, I came across the phrase, the feminine gaze. And that comes from way back in the 1920s and 30s when cinema was becoming a thing and more accessible. But women were portrayed in cinema strictly from a male gaze point of view. We had male camera people, we had male directors, we had male editors, we had male producers, we had male script writers. And women really had to conform to how men thought women should be seen rather than how a woman felt like she should be seen in the role that was being offered. And this became something that was studied by feminists as the feminist movement came through the 60s and 70s and was written about and talked about. And while I'm not an extreme feminist, it's just not like the number one thing I'm going to tell you about my identity. It is something that has influenced me. And I really let this kind of marinate in my soul for a little bit about the images that I was taking. And the images, allowing women, inviting women to come in and have agency over how they're seen, became a really big thing I wanted to play with. And I began to talk to women about that. And instead of having clients who saw my website or my social media and said, hey, I want a session, and doing everything over the phone and through email, I began to interview women early. Like they don't sign a contract but before I have invested time interviewing with them so they can ask me questions and so that I can explain this, that they are coming in with a certain amount of responsibility. And that has, I don't know if I've scared anybody off, but the vast majority who meet with me, like 80% are signing a contract if we get to that point. So
That's
a
amazing.
pretty good conversion rate.
That's a huge conversion rate. And I think it tells people right up front, you know, they have the option to choose whether you're the right fit to work with each other. I'm sure there's people that you're kind of like, you know what, this isn't the right fit for what I do.
Yeah, and I actually learned that, and the not right fit for me every single time has been the woman who comes and says, I really don't have much interest in doing this, but I know he wants this for his birthday, or he's expecting me to give him a little book and album on our wedding day because that's what all of our friends have done. And so I'm going to do this out of obligation. I won't do those anymore. I don't mind talking to them about how can we make it valuable to you if they want to do that. Sometimes they're open to that and it really shifts their perspective. Sometimes they're not open to that. But I did do that one time in the wedding setting that just really, that was the end of it. Because she came in to look at her images and she was like, these images are all technically very great. And I know you're a good photographer, but I hate myself. And I was like, oh,
that's sad.
This is not a place where I finally had to say to her, if you can't say something nice about the image, about you in the image, not how well focused it is or how well lit it is or how the pose is just exactly what you think he'll want, but about you in the image, don't say anything at all and just pass it by. And I learned so much from that situation, but I also learned I do not ever want to be in that situation again, because as a photographer, if somebody hates the photos, even though you know you've done a really good job, and they hate it because they're really struggling with themselves.
Yeah.
They weren't ready for that.
No.
And you did nothing but harm them. And I'm not willing to participate in that anymore.
Will you tell us a little bit about when somebody's coming to meet with you as a potential client, what is that initial, I don't know if I want to call it an interview, but what does that initial conversation look like?
Usually we do it at a coffee shop, but sometimes they'll come to my studio, which is in my home. And it is, I will ask them, I try to ask them pretty open-ended questions, you know, tell me about why you're wanting to do this. Tell me about why now. What do you want to get from it? Depending on what their answers are, my follow-ups are always, so if they say, I know that this is supposed to give you confidence and I'm really looking for confidence. Tell me what things make you feel confident outside of this so that we can incorporate some of that so that I can get to know them. Give me some words that if somebody described you with those words that would make you feel seen, make you feel heard, make you feel worthy, that they would just press those seen, heard, and worthy buttons for you. Sometimes I'll say, you know, tell me kind of what style you're looking for your outfits or your clothing. Are you looking for, and I'll throw out words to help them, coach them along, but not coach them to a style, but give them vocabulary to begin to talk about it. You know, are you wanting flowy? Are you wanting sleek? Are you wanting mysterious? Are you wanting lots of light and airy and beautiful? I'm right here. Because all of those things can be beautiful and none of them are wrong. But if I put on somebody who was looking for mysterious, all light and airy, because that's how I saw them and I was misidentifying them, I have not given them the highest possibility of an experience.
I think that's super interesting. And I kind of want to go back to that, like pulling the confidence out of somebody. So long before I ever met you, I did a boudoir photo shoot with a different photographer. And it was because all my friends had done it and they were like, oh my God, you'll feel so good about yourself. You should totally do this. And I was like, all right, fine. But I went into it like scared out of my mind, like probably drank a half a bottle of champagne before we even started.
It's vulnerable.
Well, it is. And it's like, and they did this whole hair and makeup thing, which was fine but I'm not a hair and makeup girl. And I did feel really good about the photos at the end. But until I met you, I never thought about the fact that it's not really, I don't think they look like me. And for proof of that, the photographer had put one of the photos of me on her Instagram page, and my friends all follow it. They didn't know it was me. They didn't even know it was me.
And that information about people having experiences similar to that came to me pretty early on. And I happen to know who you did the pictures with. Excellent photographer. I don't want to say anything bad about her, but definitely has a particular approach which asks the client to fit into their own approach to boudoir, rather than to say, as a photographer, I can come to you. Yeah. I can come to where you are. It takes more effort. It's probably less profitable in the long run to do it the way that I do it, because it takes more time. So you can take fewer clients, but I would feel so crappy about myself in that situation. And what message is given to a woman who looks at an image of herself and says, nobody's going to recognize this as me, that the message is, oh, who I am wasn't acceptable and I had to be changed in order to be acceptable in this genre of photography. And I do not believe that is the truth. I do believe, I've done some education. I've watched wonderful, beautiful, technically amazing photographers who produce amazing images from an objective point of view, who do not allow any subjective part of the client to come into it. And I think that takes it from being an experience where you can gain confidence, an experience where you feel very worthy, to being, okay, I'm the Barbie doll and they're going to pose me, and then I'm going to have these images and I'm going to see that I have the potential to be that. But you know what? That's not me every day.
Well, and I think there's an interesting distinction there, because, and I'm not unhappy with my photos. I'll be clear about that. But I went into it and I would not have known how to do it in my voice, in my style. And granted, this was probably 7 or 8 years ago that I did those. And I have a lot more confidence now. Maybe I could walk in and do that, but I got to believe that most of your clients don't walk in and go, this is how I want to be seen. This is what I want to look like. So just from working with you on photo shoots for my family, I know what it's like to work with you, and you just make it comfortable. You just pull out the natural moments, you pull out the natural things. So talk to me a little bit about that process and how that evolves to help somebody that maybe comes in that was kind of like me, that's like, I don't know what the frick I'm doing here. You're the pro. Help me find me.
Yeah. So that starts at that initial consultation, which is a better word than interview.
Yeah, I was like, interview doesn't feel right.
And that just spewed out of me because I was nervous. At that initial consultation, I really am working very hard to observe what makes her nervous, to observe where she gets comfortable, to observe what she chooses to wear, to just ask her about who she is, not even so much about how she wants to be seen yet. Because if I start out with how do you want to be seen, most women are going to give me the deer in the headlights look.
Yeah, I would.
And they're expecting me to just now ram them with my car. And that's not that's not a good place to start.
No.
So being willing to invest in them, to hear their stories, because they've come here for some reason. And if it's like, hot damn, it's a client and they want to pay me and they want to do this, and not to hear what's going on, I'm celebrating. That's a very different person than somebody who says, I had recently somebody who says, my husband left me for another woman and he's just trashed me. He's trashed me verbally. He's trashed me to our friends. We moved here. I didn't make a lot of friends that weren't connected to him. And now I'm alone with my 2 kids and I'm starting over again. And I need to prove to myself that I'm beautiful again. That's a very different That's a very different process to prepare and to be in the photography session and to do a reveal session. Completely different approach than somebody who comes and says, oh my gosh, I just got the best promotion. I am feeling so on top of the world. I've always wanted to do this secretly in my heart, and now I'm not going to hold back. This is my reward. It's completely different attitude, tone. There's a different energy in the studio when I'm working with those two different women. But what photographers are taught about boudoir is here are the poses that sell. Here is the pose that looks good on any woman's body or body shape. Now, if she's plus size, this is what you want to do. And if she's not plus size, but she's a little too slender, here's how you make her look like she has curves. And we're trying to push everybody into the same mold, regardless of where they started. And I've rejected that. And I think part of why I've rejected that is because in my own life, in not necessarily a photography situation, but in any situation where I feel like somebody's trying to force me into something that's not me, I begin to question my worth. Wait, are you saying that what I do is not worthy?
That's what I have been thinking about this entire time, is like zooming out from the boudoir lens. I think so many people feel invisible for a lot of their lives. And I think part of that is because, especially with women, we are constantly defined as mom or as an employee or as a wife, or, like we're put into these boxes, and there are so many expectations put on you as that role, to the point where I think a lot of times, you meet somebody new and it's like, hey, tell me about yourself. What do you do? And it's like you lead with the roles instead of with really deep down, like who you are.
Absolutely. And I want to dive into that a little bit more, but I want to go back to the two people that you talked about, Susan Beth, and I want to acknowledge that both of those reasons are good reasons to do it. There's not something that was wrong about one or the other, but you're right. It is a very different process in preparing for that. And I actually want to give kudos to both of those women for both of the reasons, one as a reward for yourself, and two, to find your confidence again. I think those are both great reasons. Do you agree?
I completely agree. And I completely agree. And I think that every woman is going to have a unique aspect to her reason. And it doesn't matter if her story is similar to another client's story. That doesn't mean she needs the same thing that other client did. And if you stop there and say, oh, similar, I know who this is, I know what to do, you're in trouble as far as meeting that high expectation I have of a woman being able to see herself in the images that we do, and to see herself maybe differently, or to confirm what she already suspected about herself in the positive. It's when somebody comes to you to do boudoir, you are in a position where they are making themselves vulnerable, and you have to be trustworthy by valuing that vulnerability, not because they're scantily clad, but because they are showing you a part of them that they don't share with everybody else. And you have the power to smash them like a bug with one misplaced word. And that is the biggest responsibility. And for me as the photographer, my biggest fear is to show somebody images that all they think is, I wasn't good enough, and so she's not showing me. She's showing me what she thinks I should be instead of who I am.
That's really profound. And I think this would be a perfect time, actually. I've got to think that there's a lot of people listening to this right now that are like, wow, this lady's amazing. How do I get in touch with her? So before we continue, I think we should start there and give people those resources. So let's talk about your websites, and let's talk about your socials briefly before we continue.
So my website for this kind of work is strongconfidentfemininity.com. And you'll see a lot of black and white images, because I do a lot of black and white. You can reach out to me through that. I also have an Instagram, which is strong_confident_femininity. And I do a lot of talking, not so much about what I want to sell you, but about what it is like to be a woman who desires to feel seen, what it's like to feel seen, and sometimes what it's like to not feel seen, and how to change that. A lot of talking about authenticity and value and what it's like to be in a world that it doesn't do this really well all of the time, and how you're craving for it to do it better.
Yeah, I love that. I'm guessing people are thinking like you cost millions of dollars based on how eloquently you're speaking about this. But
I wish it cost millions of dollars.
but I can say that I do think that you're actually very reasonably priced compared to how much work you put into things. I think it's definitely a labor of love for you and a passion project. And so I think maybe you don't quite charge what you're worth. So I think you're still a pretty dang good
I'm
deal.
working on that.
So
I'm
there you
working
go,
on
audience. Jump in there before she realizes how much she's worth. So
Thank you.
but let's go back and kind of dig in a little bit deeper on this, because as Britt said, beyond just talking about the boudoir role or a photographer role, I think we are seen for our roles just in general, like when we meet people. So I want to talk about that a little bit further. Social media definitely plays a role in that. And, I've talked about it a lot of times that I think my secret to success on social media is being authentic, because what you see is what you get. If you call me for a mortgage, you are going to see the exact same girl that you see on my social media. You're not going to have any surprises. I'm probably going to be in my sweatpants on my couch when we have a Zoom conversation. It just is. But I think that authentic person is relatable and approachable. And that is my goal. And I feel like that about you as well. I feel like I'm not nervous. The photo shoots I've done with you, I have not been afraid of that. So I think you naturally bring that out in people, but I think it's because you are confident in who you are. And, I know that's a journey for all of us, and we probably bounce back and forth around that, but talk to us about what that journey's been for you.
So I think there have been a lot of times where my desire to be authentic in relationship with people has overwhelmed people because they're not used to being authentic. And so for a long time, I lived with the belief that that was a deficit for me, and that I wanted to know who I was working with. I wanted to know who I was talking to. I did not want to talk about superficial things. I'm not a big trend follower. I'm not, and I don't mean that just in photography. I mean that in my whole life. I'm just kind of nerdy, but really, if you and I want to sit down over a cup of coffee, I'm expecting that I'm going to walk away knowing something more about you in a way that makes me want to be around you again. And if all we talk about is TV shows, what we saw on social media, what the weather is like, and
Surface stuff.
Stuff, I'm going to walk away feeling like, I was not successful at getting to know this person. That is very pressuring for some people if they're not ready to share for themselves. So I've had to learn to navigate. Not everybody's
Kind of read
ready
your
for
room.
that level. Read the room a little bit better, and also to begin to throw out some softball questions that allow people to define where their boundaries are, and then to honor their boundaries. And I think it took. I'm in my early 60s now. I think it took until I was in my late 40s, early 50s for me to realize you can be too much authentic, and you need to give them the space to work their way into that. You need to listen more. You need to not assume you know where they're going with what they're going to say. And you need to tone down the I'm super smart and I'm reading the room really well. You might very well be exactly right about what's going on in this person's life, but that does not mean they're ready to talk about it. So I've had to learn a lot myself and to rein myself in, not to be inauthentic, but to give the space for people, women in particular, to be able to feel safe with me before I go too deep. And that's been a hard lesson sometimes.
Yeah. But to also allow them to show up, maybe even on that particular day where they're feeling, because there are times like I'm ready to just dump everything that's in my brain. And there are days that I just don't have it. And so I think that probably varies from time to time. And I remember the first time you and I went to breakfast, and I remember leaving being like, I can't wait to do that again. I wish we had 3 hours because I could have talked to you forever.
I felt the exact same way the first time that I met with you.
It's just like you are excellent at that, at finding that vibe of, letting people be open, but also for one thing, for me, I have a hard time figuring out how much to let them talk versus me talk. And most of my conversations on a work side of things, they're expecting me to do a lot of talking, but I want them to do the talking. So I kind of have a hard time with that. But I felt like when we walked away, I was able to give you a good vibe of who I was. And I felt like I really knew who you were that first conversation. And I think that's pretty special.
It's been a work in progress. And I have to give a lot of credit to my husband, who, as we have socialized together, he grew up in a family that really was private. Even amongst themselves, they were private. There was not a lot of substantive discussion. There was not a lot of let's get down and dirty about what's the real problem here. I grew up in a family that was the extreme opposite, where everything was on display. And I think in part that's because my parents were both hoping to be seen, hoping to be valued, hoping to fit in. I grew up in Silicon Valley. I went to a church that had a lot of IBM and GE execs at it. And here were my parents with no college diplomas, working their tails off, living in rentals, not buying houses, not having swimming pools, not going to Tahoe to ski, not taking their kids on all of those things. My dad he worked on straight commission. He'd take a Friday of one week and a Monday of the next, and that was 4 days off. That was vacation. And we would go to the mountains. And so they were doing everything they could sometimes to be seen and to be valued. I had very intelligent parents. They just did not do the path that a lot of very intelligent people do. So I grew up where there were times it was like, Daddy, why did you tell that person this about me? That was not something I wanted to share.
Okay, fair.
So the boundaries were less. So when you combine my husband with these very tight boundaries and very close to the vest, even amongst the family members, and my family, which was just like, it's all there. You ended up with somebody like me who has learned from my husband and from my family of origin that there's a place for some of each of those things. And to find what those places are. I feel like sometimes, this is in a talk that I have given and will continue to give, that sometimes oversharing, as much as that you're hoping that that's going to make you feel seen, is to just share with everybody, sometimes that actually becomes performative.
Yes.
And when that happens, you will never feel seen. You will never feel seen when your discussion, your actions, your being is in performance mode.
I think that's a really good point. And I've seen this a couple times with people who they show up and they immediately tell you all the worst shit that's happened to them. And it's like an insecurity where they're afraid you're going to find out. So they're just going to lead with it and know if you're going to leave them right off the bat or not. But it becomes this like, dear God, it's so much up front that you're like, if this is what they're sharing now, what else is there? And is this person going to be negative all along? And it can be a lot. So I think you're right. I think there is a balance. I think there's a time and a place. And I also personally believe that you got to be a little bit careful who you share all of your things with.
Absolutely.
I have definitely shared things with the wrong people before, and it's bit me big time.
I think that choosing who you share with is a life skill that we are all developing until the day we die. I don't think we are ever done developing that skill. So don't beat yourself up too much if you've shared with people who it was a wrong decision. It's a try and learn and try again, and maybe learn a different lesson because you tweaked it, and there's some great things from the tweaking, but there was still this other thing that just, and also, some people are bad pickers for who they're in relationship with.
Man.
And then some of us
Correct.
some people
My father might be one of those.
have bad pickers for who they share information with. And I think sometimes you said these people are just dumping it all out, like, you're not really sure what they're doing. I think sometimes they're dumping it all out to say, I want you to understand why I'm not perfect. And so I'm going to give you my story, but I'm giving it to you in such a chaotic way that it doesn't make sense to you at all. And what they're really trying to say is, I have these imperfections and there's a reason I have them. And those imperfections don't take care of my worth if you understand. They don't take away my worth if you understand how I came to have these imperfections.
That's very insightful. Well, let's talk about being seen, though. I think a lot of this comes back to that. So I think a lot of people are struggling to be seen, and sometimes that manifests itself in that way, where they dump all the things right away. Sometimes it manifests itself in that they show up as somebody that they genuinely are not. So I think that's really an important topic for us to address here, because I think everybody in some form of their life has probably felt that being unseen, whether it was when you were a teenager or whatever. I do think there's some magic power in your 40s. I think once you hit that 40s, I really found who I was and really found my most authentic self. And I lost my give a shit about a lot of things and about the way people thought about me. Doesn't mean things are perfect. There's still lots of hard things that happen in life, but I think like you said, it's a constant journey to figure out who you are and how you want to be seen by people and who you want to be seen by.
Yes, I completely agree. I think the one thing I want to say is that being seen has been scientifically studied, sometimes with different verbiage, but that concept of being seen is a human necessity. And so it's not wrong to desire to be seen. It's not selfish to desire to be seen. But also, being seen is not the same as being paid attention to. And we often look for things that are going to capture other people's attention towards us as humans in this search to be seen. And I'm going to go back to the work of Brene Brown, who I love her work on vulnerability, and that Daring Greatly book I read that about the same time as I was starting to do intimate portraiture with women. And that concept that there are going to be times when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and the recipient of that gift boggles it, whether that's purposely because they don't care and you just had a bad picker on who you were sharing with, or because they don't know what to do with it. But you can't find the person who can see you if you don't try. And you can't make yourself into something else and feel seen. So a really good example of this is people who are perfectionists, and they are looking for their perfection to capture other people's attention. But what their perfection is doing, unbeknownst to them, is building walls that people can't see through. And so that can leave that person feeling more pressure to be more perfect because they obviously weren't good enough to be seen. And rather than stepping back and saying, maybe what I want to do is acknowledge that, you know what? I didn't do that quite how I wanted to. It didn't land the way that I wanted it to. May I try again? And sometimes you're going to say, may I try again to somebody who's just like, that person probably doesn't want to be seen themselves. That person probably is enough of a perfectionist themselves that they're afraid to be associated with things that aren't perfect because they're afraid they'll be judged.
That's something that I think, I'm 33, and these last couple of years have been very transformative for me because I'm finally kind of learning how I want to be seen. And I'm finally stopping to just look intrinsically instead of being so worried about how I'm being perceived and so worried about how I think I'm supposed to be perceived. I'm like, well, wait a second. What feels natural and authentic to me? And to me, being seen equals permission to exist as yourself. But how can someone identify the version of themselves they actually want to be seen as if they don't feel like they know who she is yet?
Great question.
That is an excellent question, and I have an answer.
Yes. I was hoping you might.
No, I I think there are three components that I recommend to allowing yourself to feel and be seen. And the first is what I call witnessing. And that requires a give and take. You need to be able to witness other people as well. And witnessing is not saying, I saw what you did and here's how you can improve it.
Okay.
That is not witnessing. I learned this in a feminine embodiment class, which is just a disguise for saying pole dancing.
Okay. Everybody's listening now.
But I did take a pole dancing class. I'm not going to claim that I'm the world's greatest pole dancer. In fact, my shoulders prevent me from climbing the pole, so I just kind of twirl around it.
I think I would just look like a baby moose trying to learn to walk for the first time.
But in that class, there was a lot of prompts for how to claim a part of your femininity. And there's the whole theory behind all of that. I'm not going to go into the details of that. But there's an opportunity, and they call watching somebody else dance, they call that witnessing. And I was invited to watch others to dance. And that is an honor, to watch somebody who's poured out their joy and their suffering, their confidence and their hope, their grief and their pain into a dance that is free form.
Wow.
And how they express that. You're not there to tell them what they should have done different. You're not there. Witnessing is not to critique what they did. Witnessing is to watch them and tell them, I saw your pain in this part of your dance. Not, you shouldn't have pain. Not, gosh, in that part of the music, I would have expected you to express joy. I saw your pain. If you didn't see something, don't make up some bullshit. Just be quiet. That's your issue, not their expressive issue. So I learned the rules of witnessing in this particular place. And then I was invited to take my camera and to witness with a group of women who were very advanced in this, and to stay present with their expression, even if I did not understand the expression. Not to find the perfect light, not to find the perfect angle, not to edit them into something different than they were, but to just be present with them. That was a huge learning opportunity for me. Then I was invited to let other people witness my dance. Scariest thing I've ever done.
I bet.
In a lot of ways. But not to be critiqued for how I moved or where I wobbled or where I kind of got stuck in a non-graceful position and had to figure out how to get out of it. But to be told, I saw you in this part. This was not an instant process in any way. So I think to be seen, you have to first be able to witness others, and then you have to choose to allow yourself to be witnessed for who you are. I think that self-witnessing comes in the form of some journaling that is about not what are my goals, what happened today, what did somebody do to me, how am I processing my old pain, but journaling that allows you to sit with yourself long enough to understand yourself.
Wow.
And then I think the third component is choosing who you want to be seen by. And the witnessing gives you safety. The journaling gives you knowledge about who you are and who you want to share yourself as. And the choosing gives you agency over the process. And I think if you put those three things together, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a social scientist, but if you put those three things together, you have a better opportunity to feel seen. If you mess up the choosing, you're not going to feel seen. That's okay. if you messed up the choosing who, but you know you showed yourself to be who you really are, that's a victory. If you witnessed somebody and they were unwilling to witness you back, you gave them a gift. It was not a transactional exchange. That's okay. Being seen is not clean. There's no formula for it. It's a constant trying, adjusting, trying again, and giving people the opportunity that they might be seen.
I think that's a really important point about the trying again, because I feel like you're probably not going to nail that the first time. And that's a huge journey. I mean, I'll be honest, listening to you tell that story about you having to do a pole dance and everybody else watching you, that's my freaking nightmare. As confident as I feel like I am and like totally know who I am, that is my absolute actual nightmare. And I'm like, damn, I want to be Susan Beth when I grow up, because she is a badass.
Renee and I made eye contact like, oh my God.
I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
But I do think you don't get things right. And you acknowledged pain in there multiple times. And I think that's a really important thing, because I think we all have pain, and that looks different for everybody. And that pain is a part of who we are, all of us. And I honestly believe that confidence comes from getting through pain, figuring out how we get on the other side of our own pain and the bad things that have happened to us. And I think the things that have happened to me in my life that sucked always pushed me to the next level. And it doesn't mean that I didn't hit a really rough spot for a while, but it's what helped me get to the next path. So I think being able to show your pain in a manner like that and be able to acknowledge seeing somebody else's pain in a way that they want it to be seen is really freaking powerful.
I agree with all that you said. It is not, I've given you 3 pieces that I think help. Again, I'm going to say it. It's not formulaic. It's not do A, B, and C, and you'll get there. Doing A, B, and C that somebody else prescribed for you is performative. There's no doubt about it. You cannot be seen when you're performative. Taking tools and making them your own and trying very hard to keep them from being just like somebody else's, but to put your own stamp on those tools, that is what can get you seen. But again, you could do a great job of revealing yourself and the wrong audience, and you're going to feel like shit. You can do a poor job of revealing yourself to the right audience, and they're going to ask you questions, and they're going to get to the good job of it.
Excellent point.
So there's no way you get to control it all the time. You have to let go of that. You cannot say, that's the person I want to see me, and make it happen. They have to be willing to see you.
Wow.
I have full body goosebumps.
So many bars.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. I would say I did a personal branding shoot with you, and that was the most seen that I had ever felt in my entire life. I left that feeling just so empowered and so myself. And then when I got the photos and it was actually the version of myself that I had been trying to achieve for so long, I cried like a freaking baby. So I just think that who you are and what you do it has so much power and so much magic. And I just think you're incredible.
Agreed.
Thank you. I can screw up pretty bad too.
Well, so can everybody. But honestly, that's part of who you are, right? And that's how you've gotten to where you are. And so much wisdom there. Honestly, this is one of my favorite episodes. Total fire. I hope everybody took pages of notes on this.
I'm over here taking notes currently.
Please share this. If you, gosh, I want to say who to share this with, but like literally every female that you know in your life probably needs to hear this no matter what age they are. I think there's tons of good stuff in here. Listen to it again. Please like, share, subscribe. And then please go connect with Susan Beth on social media as well. Strong Confident Femininity. It sounds like her SEO is pretty on point. So if you just Google that, you'll find her. But definitely check that out on Instagram as well if you are female, and you can see what she does in the flesh, quote unquote.
We'll see you all next week. Here's to empowering each other one story at a time.